During the Second World War, all countries utilised spies and espionage to try and get the upper hand over their enemies. Some spies turned against their countries of origin to work for the enemy, and one of these was John Amery. There were a number in Britain who defected over to the side of the Germans. One of the most prominent of these traitors was William Joyce, who was commonly known as Lord Haw-Haw. John Amery went further than just broadcasting propaganda for Germany aimed at demoralising the British. He actively wished for a British fighting unit for the Nazi socialist causes against communism. So join us today as we look at the vengeful execution of John Amery, the bravest traitor. And remember to support our channel. Please make sure to subscribe. John Amery was born in Chelsea in London, and his father was a Member of Parliament and later a Conservative minister, and his mother was a Hungarian Jew. As a child he was rather poorly behaved, going for a number of different tutors, and he was sent to Harrow boarding school, but he left after a year, being described as the most difficult boy the housemaster had tried to manage. He dreamed of a career in film production, and eventually set up a number of failing companies which led to his bankruptcy. His early life was somewhat of a failure, and at the age of 21, John Amery married a former prostitute named Una Wing. But he could not earn enough money to keep her from the streets, and he always begged his dad for money. During this time he was virulently anti-communist, and he became attracted to the Nazi socialist way of life, and the policies that Hitler was trying to establish across Germany. In 1936 he left Britain to go and live in France after being made bankrupt, and he met with French fascist leaders. He then visited other countries including Germany. Amery told his family that during the Spanish Civil War he joined Franco's nationalists and was awarded a Medal of Honor as he served in intelligence. Following the Spanish War, he returned to France and even stayed here during the German invasion of the country in June 1940. Very quickly the country fell under Nazi occupation, and there's very famous images of Hitler strolling around Paris, admiring the city he had claimed. Amery was given an offer to go and work in Germany in politics, but the difficulty of getting him out of France was there. In September 1942, Amery was given a travel permit, and he then went to Berlin, and during a meeting he proposed creating a British anti-Bolshevik group that would operate within Nazi Germany. Hitler himself was rather pleased with this and Amery's devotion, and he allowed him to reside in Germany. He then worked to produce a number of pro-German propaganda broadcasts, and even spoke to the British people to join the Nazi cause against communism. These broadcasts were attempts to break the British morale, but they overall had little impact. Amery then joined the LVF, a group that had volunteered to fight alongside the Germans on the Eastern Front, and this was initially made up of French soldiers, and Amery, who dreamed of leading a British unit, wished to recruit dozens of men to fight for their propaganda purpose. The British Free Corps was his idea, and at first the first recruits came from a group of prisoners of war, and recruiting for the group was done in prisoner of war camps. Leaflets were handed out, and research had emerged that 54 men belonged to the unit, but at one point the British Free Corps had no more than 27 men. Up until later 1944, John Amery wrote propaganda broadcasts in Berlin, but the war was greatly turning against the Germans and Hitler. He offered support to Mussolini, but the Second World War was in dire straits for the Germans, and Amery was captured. At the end of April 1945, he was captured by Italian partisans near Como, along with his mistress, Michelle Thomas. They were both to be executed, but this was then commuted before they were sent to Milan and handed over to the British. Arriving back in England, Amery was sent to Bow Street Magistrates Court on the 9th of July 1945, and he was charged with 8 counts of high treason. He was then sent back to prison to await a huge trial at the Old Bailey. During his trial he stated that he never personally attacked Britain, saying he was not a Nazi, but was more anti-communist, which did not ally him as a Nazi. There were attempts to prove that he was in fact a Spanish citizen, and therefore could not commit treason against Britain, and attempts were made to make him seem mentally ill. This ultimately failed, but little needed to be done, as surprisingly on the first day of the trial, Amery decided to plead guilty on all 8 of the charges. In a remarkable and shocking turn of events, his trial only lasted 8 minutes. The judge in question confirmed to Amery what it meant, that if he admitted guilt, there would only be one outcome, his death. Amery understood fully, and it was stated, "John Amery, I am satisfied that you knew what you did, and you did it intentionally and deliberately, after you had received warning from your fellow countrymen that the course you were pursuing amounted to high treason. They called you a traitor and you heard them, but in spite of that you continued in that course. You now stand a self-confessed traitor to your king and country, and you have forfeited your right to live." A petition was launched that Amery should be reprieved, and there were claims that he was already dying of tuberculosis, but this was proven incorrect during his post-mortem. He requested that 4 photographs he held should be passed on to his brother after his execution, and during his time in Wandsworth inside a condemned cell, he smoked heavily, going through his 15-cigarette allowance a day easily. It was Albert Pierrepoint and his assistant H.E. Critchell who carried out the execution of John Amery. He was later described by Pierrepoint as the bravest man he ever had to execute. Pierrepoint and his assistant met with Amery the day before his execution, and during this they calculated his height and weight, along with the drop required to take his life instantly. His height was recorded at 5 feet 7 inches, and his weight 140 pounds, and he was of muscular build. The day of his execution was the 19th of December 1945, to take place at Wandsworth Prison. An execution cell inside Wandsworth had been used many times over the years, and the gallows here were frequently used to execute murderers and other serious criminals. Shortly before 9 a.m, Amery was brought from his cell by 2 guards before the formal identification process took place. He was then led up to the stairs of the gallows, and on the platform was Pierrepoint and his assistant. Amery extended his hand to shake Pierrepoint's and said, "I've always wanted to meet you, Mr. Pierrepoint, but under rather different circumstances." At this point the executioner smiled and shook his hand before spinning Amery round gently and securing his arms behind his back. He then placed the hood and noose over his head, and within seconds Amery was killed, plummeting to his death through the trapdoor below. The drop of 7 feet 8 inches was enough to kill him. He was the son of a rather prominent politician. However, John Amery's death is one which can be interpreted as rather troublesome. There is in no doubt that he went against the British, deserting his country to go and support the enemy, the Nazis, and also he produced propaganda for them. However, he did not take the life of anyone during World War II, like so many of the war criminals who were executed following the conflict did. Amery's dramatic death came at 9:01 a.m. on December the 19th, 1945, and he died a traitor who bravely decided to admit his wrongs, despite knowing exactly what came before him. He was a man who had minimal effect on anything during the conflict, but was a man that Hitler respected, a scary yet proud thing that John Amery treasured. Once again, thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.